Hello everyone, and thanks once again for joining us for this Sunday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm David Percy. Up first, we've got a flood advisory out for Snow Glacier Dammed Lake is releasing, and flooding caused by the Glacier Dammed Lake outburst is expected, and the locations, as you can see on the graph there, kind of outlines the whole zone there from Kenai Lake to Ski Lac Lake. Snow River, Kenai Lake, and the Kenai River from Kenai Lake to Ski Lac Lake. That's the area of possible flooding. And that's out until 2:30 p.m. on Thursday. So in a few days, at least most of the upcoming week. And then impacts would be the Primrose Campground Road may become impassable for small vehicles. And then the Sterling Highway residences from mileposts 48 to 50 could see water in their yards. Cooper Landing boat launch could become submerged, and potential flooding of Quartz Creek boat ramp and adjacent campsites there. And for more information on the Snow Glacier Dam Lake, visit that link that's hard to see because I can hardly see it here. Anyway, moving on to satellite imagery. Got clouds rolling up, another system tracking northward there into the southern panhandle today. That brought rain into that area with lighter amounts farther to the north there, but still a train of moisture. You can see one batch moves into the northern panhandle, actually into Canada there, followed by that next one coming up during the late morning, early afternoon hours. And also an area of clouds and some shower activity from the Copper River Basin, and to a lesser extent south central Alaska. Especially early today, there were more showers around than this afternoon. Up into the eastern interior, all the way to the eastern Arctic coast. Otherwise, had some pretty good clearing occurring over Bristol Bay and into the areas of the southwest interior, Kuskokwim Valley, as well as Kenai Peninsula. Cook Inlet had some sun breaks during the afternoon today, and looks like possibly up over the Koyukuk Valley as well, and up over the Noatak Valley maybe. But the one over Bristol Bay in the southwest part, that's kind of the biggest area, clear skies. A few clouds over Kodiak, not too bad there. You can see out to the west, the next system over the Russian Far East, that band of moisture already pushing into the western Bering Sea, but really not reaching the Aleutians. And there it is on the chart today, 998 millibar low, not particularly strong and not really moisture laden as well as that moves eastward there. Otherwise, higher pressure to the south kept it pretty nice over the Aleutians and the southeast Bering, with a lot of clear skies there from the southwest interior, right on down across the southeast Bering Sea, actually, with Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutians dry, a few sun breaks for Adak and Atka, isolated showers Kodiak Island, the Aleutian Range, and scattered showers mostly over the mountainous terrain this afternoon, over the Copper River Basin areas, and then the heavier rain over the southern panhandle. Some notable rainfall amounts in the 12-hour period ending this afternoon was just under an inch at Ketchikan, while Petersburg picked up 0.6 of an inch of precipitation. And up in the Copper River Basin there, Paxson had about a half an inch of rainfall, and again, rain right up the eastern interior there, Chalkyitsik, Yukon Flats, by the or northeast of Fort Yukon, had about a third of an inch of rain, and also some light rain, fog, and drizzle occurring along the central and eastern Arctic coast today. Looking at tonight's forecast, you'll see that low, the front kind of just goes to pieces, just several troughs, got some surges of moisture rotating around that 998 millibar low. It's tracking slowly eastward, and the first trough makes landfall overnight tonight with maybe some light rain, fog, and drizzle. There'll be a little bit more widespread up through the Bering Strait. Otherwise, the interior, that ridge of high pressure moves in, so it'll be pretty dry with some clearing, light winds from the north slope all the way down to Kodiak Island, Bristol Bay. Just isolated showers now lingering over western Cook Inlet and the western Alaska Range, as well as Copper River Basin. A little less in the way of shower activity over the eastern interior areas. And that system kind of tracking northward, it keeps it wet over the southern southeast coast, but not too bad up to the north. Dry conditions for the North Gulf Coast. Juneau, maybe an isolated shower, but chances diminishing. Stays dry over the Aleutians and actually the southern Bering Sea. Then for tomorrow, another cold front kind of drops down out of the Russian Far East there, but you can see the precipitation associated with it isn't really well organized. Same thing with that warm front, kind of just surges of moisture rotating around in a counterclockwise flow that make landfall, bring chances of showers into the southwest coast and maybe Bristol Bay. Afternoon showers over the mountainous terrain of south central Alaska with some sunbreaks like we saw today, and eastern interior some showers, otherwise pretty dry over the central and northern interior. Fog, low clouds along the Arctic coast, stays damp over the southern panhandle, more showery to the north. The Aleutians staying pretty nice. And then on Tuesday, next system pushes more rain into the west and southwest part of the state, but some showers will extend all the way up to the Noatak Valley and the western Arctic coast. Stays showery over the eastern interior, over toward Eagle, and to a lesser extent in the Tanana Valley. Copper River Basin mostly dry, as well as the eastern North Gulf Coast. Trough sliding northeastward in southwest flow brings increasing rain across Cook Inlet and the Kenai Peninsula, especially the western Susitna Valley during the day, and rain over the eastern Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula, and small craft advisory level winds coming in with that pretty tight low, pretty good gradient there. Right now it doesn't look like it'll be gale force, going 25 to 30 knots along the south coast out of the east for Tuesday afternoon, with increasing rain spreading northward throughout the day. May reach Juneau, possibly Haines, probably not Skagway, and look for some partly sunny conditions there in the Yakutat area, as well as eastern North Slope and maybe the Arctic coast. Otherwise, looking at lows tonight in the upper 40s to lower 50s for the Panhandle, upper 30s Copper River Basin, in the 40s across the remainder of the state there, lower 40s for the Kuskokwim Valley, mid 40s in the Bristol Bay area. Highs tomorrow, upper 50s for Bristol Bay, lower 60s Kodiak Island area, State Airport on up into Seldovia and Homer. Upper 50s to lower 60s, south central Alaska, upper 50s in the Copper River Basin, Kuskokwim Valley, and lower 60s over the southern Panhandle, otherwise just a shade below 60 elsewhere. Lows the following morning, 40s and 50s, about sum it up across much of the southern part of the state, up down in the 30s again for the Copper River Basin. Highs not much different, mid to upper 50s most areas there, except a little warmer over the Panhandle, lower to mid 60s there. And for the northern areas, we've got 30s from the Brooks Range out to the Arctic coast, Ambler 38, otherwise in the 40s. Highs tomorrow, 50s to lower 60s. A little cooler out toward the Bering Strait, and 40s for the north or for the Arctic coast, near 50 in the North Slope. Again, lows not much different than Monday morning for Tuesday morning, so just jump to the highs, and those aren't much different from Monday afternoon for Tuesday afternoon, 50s to lower 60s, warmest over the eastern interior. And for the southwest coast, looking lows in the 40s, mid to upper 40s, lower 40s for St. Lawrence Island, highs in the lower 50s, except upper 50s, places like Adak, and mid 50s for the Alaska Peninsula. And then lows on Tuesday morning in the 40s again, mid to upper 40s, a little cooler towards St. Lawrence Island, 42 there forecast for Savunga. And then the highs, upper 40s for Savunga and Gamble, lower 50s for the Pribilofs, 50s for the Aleutians, and mid 50s for Bristol Bay. Again, Adak, the warm spot with 57 in the forecast, mid 50s.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Over the Arctic coast, into the North Slope, a little bit IFR possible on the eastern Arctic coast, and some VFR up over the northern interior. Early morning VFR, northern Cook Inlet, low clouds, fog, right up into the Susitna Valley to the Alaska Range there, possibly north of the Alaska Range. And then starting out marginal for Prince William Sound, but VFR there for southern Cook Inlet and the eastern North Gulf Coast. Marginal VFR to start for the Panhandle, and some VFR over the southern Bering Sea with a band of IFR extending down to Kiska and Amchitka Island. Northern Bering Sea, mostly IFR. For the afternoon, marginal VFR, central Bering Sea, Aleutians, IFR. IFR for the northern Bering Sea and along the southwest coastal areas, actually right up into the Chukchi Sea, some IFR, and along the northwest coast. Better conditions over the interior, marginal VFR, areas of in the central interior there from the Kuskokwim Valley, maybe into Cook Inlet with some pretty good VFR showing up actually for south central Alaska down to Kodiak Island. North Gulf Coast could see occasionally marginal conditions, and the Panhandle areas of marginal VFR. And for the Tuesday morning time frame, IFR back in, lower clouds early on there for southern Cook Inlet, North Gulf Coast, across the southwest interior, and the eastern Bering Sea with a band down along the Aleutians, becoming VFR for the Pribilofs, and the Alaska Peninsula looking good, VFR for the Panhandle, and the eastern interior north of the Alaska Range. But there'll be VFR even south of the Alaska Range as well, and then lower conditions from the Brooks Range on out to the Arctic coast. And for the afternoon, looks pretty good up over the northern interior and also the eastern interior, mid-Yukon River Valley eastward over to the border, down into the Copper River Basin. Some areas of marginal VFR again along the Alaska Range, Talkeetnas, North Gulf Coast areas, some VFR for Cook Inlet, Madawaska-Susitna Valley, as well as Kodiak Island, and areas of marginal VFR for Bristol Bay, Kuskokwim Valley, Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta area, Seward Peninsula. Northern two-thirds of the Panhandle will be VFR, and not too bad over the Aleutians and southern Bering Sea. And for passes, Anaktuvik should be VFR tomorrow on either entrance. Same forecast for Adigan. Pretty good VFR flying the entire day, north and south approaches. And through the pass, Lake Clark and Merrill looking VFR tomorrow, especially in the afternoon hours, as is rainy. And for the windy pass, starting out marginal, becoming VFR. And Isabel as well, marginal VFR to start, becoming trending toward VFR during the afternoon hours. And Mentasta, optimistically call it VFR on either approach throughout the entire day. Tanita, same thing, looks pretty good. VFR flying. And for Portage, starting out marginal, maybe some low clouds, maybe some fog, IFR to marginal, but that'll improve to VFR probably before noontime and through the afternoon. Chilkoot and White, good VFR. Freezing levels 6,000 to 8,000 feet over the eastern Bering Sea, 10,000 over the central western Aleutians. Otherwise, 2,000 to 4,000 over the North Slope and Arctic coast, 6,000 over the remainder of the state. Icing, moisture sliding into the Panhandle, so look for isolated moderate rime icing above 7,000 feet. Another batch coming out of the Russian Far East across the northern Bering Sea, so some isolated light to moderate rime icing with that system pushing into the west coast areas and extending to the southwest. And for the jet stream, you've got a narrowing upper level ridge shifting eastward, so a northerly flow right across Cook Inlet and the Denali area. Otherwise, light winds over the eastern interior, 70 knot winds cutting just south of the Panhandle, and northwest 85 to 115 knots there coming across the Bering Sea, 9,000 feet. We've got, again, low pressure up over the northern or northwest Bering Sea, south winds 35 knots across the Seward Peninsula, and westerlies 35 to 55 knots there over the southern Bering Sea and central eastern Aleutians, pretty light over the interior, and 3,000-foot winds, light winds over the interior as well as the Gulf and Panhandle to the Arctic coast. A little breezy out there over the Bering Sea, 20 to 35 knots, and that's about it. And then it drops off even further as that southwest flow reaches the coastline, maybe around 20 knots on the Yukon Delta coast, 20 to 25 knots southerlies from the Bering Strait, western Seward Peninsula to the northwest coastal areas. And turbulence, light to isolated moderate chop for the eastern central Aleutians and areas of St. Lawrence Island.
Technology. It's the rhythm of our everyday life. We're more dependent on satellite and communication systems than at any other time in history. Disruptions can affect our economy and even our safety. To prepare for the effects of such events and minimize impacts, we need to look outside our atmosphere, some 93 million miles away, at a star we call the Sun. It's our main energy source. It warms the Earth and grows our food. While the sun and the space between may seem pleasant from our perspective, it's anything but peaceful. At its surface exists a chaotic state of eruptions and radiation. And unlike Vegas, what happens at the sun doesn't stay at the sun.
Space weather is essentially emissions from the sun, radiation, magnetic field that erupts from the solar surface, pumped out into space, sometimes right towards Earth. When it impacts the Earth, it impacts our technology. That's what we call space weather.
These solar events and their effects at Earth can disrupt systems we take for granted. From causing blackouts to the power grid, to delaying offshore drilling operations due to inaccurate GPS data. Interference with communication systems can force air traffic to reroute and impact rescue response and coordination. Outside our atmosphere, solar radiation can harm astronauts and the systems they depend on. The good news is that these eruptions can be detected early. Forecasters at the NOAA Space Weather Prediction Center in Boulder, Colorado, have their eyes on the sun at all times.
The Space Weather Prediction Center is part of the National Weather Service and is very much like a normal weather forecast office. We're here 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We're looking at data, we're looking at imagery, we're looking at model outputs. As conditions develop, we put out alerts, warnings, and watches of imminent activity to our customers so they can take action.
In many ways, forecasting space weather is a lot like forecasting hurricanes. Those who rely on space weather forecasts, like electric power grid managers, are informed early on and can begin taking protective action.
When we see an eruption on the sun, space weather forecasters will issue a watch. This is much like a hurricane watch. When a hurricane sits offshore of Miami, for example, perhaps 48 hours out, we too can see way in advance that something may be coming towards the Earth.
As the storm moves toward us, it hits a monitoring spacecraft orbiting 1 million miles away from Earth.
It's kind of our buoy sitting out there offshore, and that hurricane, about 30, 45 minutes before it makes landfall, we'll get the measurements from the buoy. That's what this spacecraft does for us. That big eruption that left the sun hits the spacecraft. Now we've got the measurements of exactly what's going to impact us here on Earth, and we issue the warnings to give the power grid a heads up that the storm is now imminent. An interesting element to this whole process is that when the forecasters issue the alert, the power grid receives the alert, takes the necessary actions to protect the grid, and the average citizen never knows anything ever happened.
The number of customers who rely on space weather information continues to grow. As our reliance on technology increases, so will our need for constant monitoring of the sun.
Space weather affects technologies. As conditions develop, we put out alerts, warnings, and watches to our customers so they can take action.
GPS has changed society. Most people don't realize how remarkable and how many different applications there are.
The GPS has become an integral part, not just of our daily lives as far as cell phones and guidance for our cars and mapping, but the whole system in agriculture is really relying heavily on high accuracy GPS.
So they're using GPS to plant those seeds with centimeter accuracy. And then they can come behind it and irrigate and fertilize right where that seed is with that 1 centimeter accuracy.
The GPS creates a line for the operator that he can steer along, or you go to another level and the operator doesn't steer anymore and the tractor has an automatic steering system on it, much like a cruise control on a car, except for when I push the button it doesn't drive a set speed. When I push a button it stays on a predefined line.
You don't even need lights. You can do it at nighttime. You program your GPS and it's driving that tractor for you. So it's huge, and it's changing the way that the farmers farm the fields.
6 or 7 days out.
There's an interest in GPS applications from space weather side because when the sun is eruptive, it causes GPS to falter, and in some cases it doesn't work at all.
Productivity may suffer to a certain degree in that there's no way that I as a human being can steer as good 8 hours a day as a GPS system's going to do. It's going to be the same all day long. Some of the other application technologies, those are going to be gone. We're not going to have the ability to do good section control on sprayers and planters and fertilizer applicators without GPS.
We see a huge growing customer base in so many different industries, so many different sectors now relying on GPS and high precision GPS. They're all big customers for us.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Okay, moving on to the marine forecast. We've got southwest winds 15 knots for the south coast of the outer panhandle, and then pretty light variable winds, 5 to 10 knots up on the north coast. For Clarence Strait, southeast at 15. Stevens Passage, also southeast, but only 10 knots, and then the northern inside water southerlies 15 knots with 3-foot seas. And looking ahead to Tuesday, big increase in the winds there on the south coast with that pretty tight storm coming northward there. So looks like right now under gale force, at least at this point in time. Small craft advisories east 25 to 30 knots, and staying light in the north coast, east 10 to 15 knots, northwest 15 knots for Clarence Strait, and north at 10 for Stevens Passage. Variable to south winds for Lynn Canal at about 10 knots. And speaking of variable winds, we got a lot of them tomorrow for the North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound, Barren Islands, and Cook Inlet, all light and variable, 10 knots or so, seas 2 to 4 feet. Then we've got 15-knot west winds in the forecast for Kamishak Bay with 3-foot seas. And for Tuesday, pick the winds up a little bit here. South 20 knots, Kamishak Bay and Cook Inlet, seas all expected to be about 5 feet. Barren Islands, south winds also at 20 knots. And for the North Gulf Coast, south winds 15 knots, seas 4 feet. And Prince William Sound, southeast winds at 15 knots with 3-foot seas. Kodiak Island, variable to west winds 10 to 15 knots. Alaska Peninsula, not too bad, west to northwest winds at 15 knots with 3 to 4-foot seas. And Bristol Bay, west winds at 15 knots. Then for Tuesday in Bristol Bay, south winds 20 knots with seas building to 6 feet. And for the Alaska Peninsula, southwest winds 20 knots with seas building 7 to 8 feet. And Kodiak Island, southwest winds 20 knots, seas 5 feet. Eastern Aleutians, west to southwest winds or so at about 15 to 20 knots with 4 to 6 foot seas. Southwest winds 20 knots for the central and western Aleutians with seas running 4 to 5 feet. And for Tuesday, western Aleutians, north winds 20 knots, seas 8 feet. And central Aleutians, 20 to 25 knot winds, Bering Sea side, northwest direction, Pacific side, northeast direction. And for the eastern Aleutians, west to southwest winds, 15 to 25 knots with 6 to 8 foot seas. And the southwest coast on Monday, southwest winds 20 knots, seas at 4 feet. Pribilof Island, southwest winds 20 knots, 5 foot seas. And southwest winds at 20 knots with 8-foot seas for St. Matthew Island, and then southerlies at 15 knots for St. Lawrence Island and Norton Sound. Tuesday, St. Lawrence Island, south winds 10 knots. Southwest coast, southwest winds 15 to 20 knots, seas at about 7 feet. Pribilof Islands, west winds of 15, and St. Matthew Island, northwest at 20 knots, seas still up around 8 feet. And for the eastern Arctic coast, tomorrow, west winds 15 to 20 knots with 3 to 4 foot seas, and the central coast, southwest at 15, seas around 5 feet. And eastern Arctic coast all the way down to Cape Thompson, east winds at 15 knots, and from Cape Thompson to Wales, winds will be southeast at 15 knots. And for Tuesday, from Wales up to, say, Point Ley or so, southeast winds at about 10 knots with 3 to 4 foot seas. Small craft advisories, though, for the central Arctic coast, southeast winds 25 knots with 5 foot seas. Eastern Beaufort Sea coast, east winds at 20 knots with seas running at about 5 feet. And looking at tonight's weather again, look for areas of light rain, fog, drizzle along the Arctic coast, mostly the central and east side. Otherwise, high pressure makes for light winds and some clearing there for the north slope into the northern valleys with isolated showers now near the western Cook Inlet area and the Alaska Range, diminishing a little bit over the interior, and rain continues over the southern panhandle. And then for tomorrow, warm front spreads some light rain or showers into the west coastal areas, Seward Peninsula, Yukon Delta, maybe the Kuskokwim Valley, a few showers over the Aleutian Range, northeast Bristol Bay, and showers in the afternoon over the mountainous terrain of south central Alaska. Could see some sun breaks like today in areas, and kind of showery though over the eastern interior, and wet and unsettled for the panhandle with that weak low. And then on Tuesday, next system spreads rain, and southwest flow spreads rain right up into Cook Inlet, increasing throughout the day, and the Kenai Peninsula, the Sitna Valley, and the Matanuska Valley to a lesser extent. Wind and rain push into the panhandle during the afternoon.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.